Paramount has officially merged with Skydance, and that partnership is already delivering some massive wins that fans have been waiting on for over a decade. The new leadership just brought World War Z 2 back from the dead, a sequel everyone thought was long gone. The original movie was supposed to get a follow-up way back in 2015, and was hyped up as the ultimate zombie action blockbuster, but it got trapped in development hell for years. Now, not only is Paramount finally reviving the franchise, but they're also moving forward with two other big projects: R-rated live-action TMNT The Last Ronin, and a whole new slate of Transformers movies. What makes all this even more wild is that up until this summer, World War Z was still Brad Pitt's highest-grossing movie, pulling in $540 million worldwide. Only F1 managed to pass that. And when you factor in inflation and higher ticket prices since 2013, World War Z still ranks among the most successful movies of the past decade. The movies actually aged surprisingly well too. Saber Interactive's tie-in game sold over 2 million copies in its first month, and just this June, the film exploded again on Netflix, breaking into the global top 10. It even outperformed newer hits like Super Mario Movie and the latest Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise. Basically, audiences reminded the studios that this franchise still has serious potential, especially at a time when early buzz around 28 years later has been kind of lukewarm. And let's be real, Hollywood has made sequels for way less than this. So what went wrong? Why didn't we get the sequel years ago? That's where things start to feel like a behind-the-scenes mystery. The first World War Z was directed by Mark Forster, and from day one, it was pitched as part one of a full trilogy, a globe-trotting action series with Brad Pitt front and center. On paper, it had everything going for it: a $190 million budget, over $500 million earned worldwide, solid reviews, strong home video sales, and a cliffhanger ending that practically begged for another chapter. Honestly, it should have been harder not to make a sequel, but somehow Paramount managed to derail it. The trouble started with Forster himself. He was accused of rewriting the ending, pushing the production into chaos, and causing major reshoots that forced the studio to delay the release several times. The issues were massive. Studios don't usually spend $40 million on a huge finale, closing off city streets, shooting an epic month-long battle, only to scrap the whole thing. The original ending wasn't the quiet lab sequence we got in theaters. It was meant to be a massive showdown in Moscow, with Brad Pitt's character leading a desperate last stand against endless waves of zombies. Paramount built enormous sets in Hungary, shipped in vehicles and weapons, spent tens of millions, and then tossed it all out. They replaced it with the smaller, more intimate ending we know now, where Pitt sneaks past the infected and discovers the idea for an antidote. Naturally, Forster took the heat. The studio claimed he lost control, blew up the budget, and dragged production way past schedule. Forster pushed back, saying Paramount forced him to start filming without a finished script, then panicked and demanded reshoots halfway through. Either way, the numbers told the story. What was supposed to cost $125 million ballooned to $190 million. The movie still made a solid profit, but the behind-the-scenes chaos left scars. Even though the ending clearly set up a sequel, Paramount's president Mark Evans shut down the original team and brought in an entirely new group of writers. After that, the sequel turned into a game of musical chairs. Juan Antonio Bayona was the next to take over as director, and Paramount even locked in a release date, June 9th, 2017. But Bayona walked away before production could really start, and the project slipped right back into limbo. Then came the biggest twist of all. David Fincher signed on to direct, with plans to start filming in the summer of 2019. Fans went nuts. Fincher and Brad Pitt teaming up again after Fight Club and Seven sounded like a dream. But just a few months before cameras were set to roll, Paramount pulled the plug, citing budget concerns. Behind the scenes, though, it wasn't really about the money. Around that time, China had introduced a strict ban on zombie movies, instantly cutting off the world's biggest box office market. Without access to China, Paramount decided a 200 million zombie epic wasn't worth the risk. And that's the real tragedy, because the original sequel plans were absolutely massive. Mark Forster had envisioned it as a global geopolitical story where humanity finally fights back against the undead. The first movie ended with Brad Pitt's character discovering that zombies don't attack the terminally ill. The sequel would have taken that idea even further, showing people around the world intentionally infecting themselves with curable diseases, something that looks deadly on paper but can be treated with simple medicine. It was a clever concept, and it fit perfectly with Max Brooks' original novel, which was written as a collection of survivor accounts from across the globe. In the book, the outbreak starts in China and spreads to the US, France, UK, Japan, and even outer space. One of the most haunting mysteries involves North Korea, where satellite images show the entire population vanishing overnight. Some believe they moved underground, while others think they were completely wiped out. Meanwhile, Cuba rises as a new world power. Its isolation and tight border control allow it to survive and even become a safe haven for refugees. The novel's biggest event is what Brooks calls the 5-year war. After the chaos of the initial outbreak, humanity stops running and launches a massive counterattack. Zombies are eventually defeated, but the world is left unrecognizable. By the end, only 72 nations remain. India and Pakistan annihilate each other in a nuclear war. The European Union merges into one country, and dozens of smaller states collapse entirely. From nuclear exchanges to Cuba's rise, all those geopolitical twists are what made Brooks' story iconic. The original plan for World War Z 2 was to finally bring that war to the screen. Brad Pitt, as producer, even wanted to repurpose footage from the scrapped Moscow sequence to tie the two films together, but all of that was lost once the project was shelved. When David Fincher came on board, the tone changed completely. He didn't want to make a massive globe-spanning war film. His version was smaller, darker, and more grounded, something closer to The Last of Us than a traditional blockbuster. Instead of world governments and armies, his story focused on regular people trying to survive in a post-outbreak world. Actress Mireille Enos, who played Pitt's wife, later said Fincher's script was incredibly strong, full of emotional depth and psychological tension, but Fincher himself admitted later that the moment had passed, the world had changed, and his take on World War Z 2 already felt like a relic before it could even begin. In the original novel, one of the most chilling storylines was about a fake vaccine, a placebo governments used to keep the public calm. When people finally realized it was a lie, society completely unraveled. But after the COVID pandemic, that concept feels less like fiction and more like a trigger. It's not even about politics anymore, it's about how audiences would react. By 2025, it's hard to imagine anyone sitting comfortably through a plot that mirrors real-world fears that closely. The same goes for the book's geopolitical themes. China turning into a federation, nuclear wars reshaping borders, global governments collapsing, stuff like that is dynamite in today's climate. Hollywood doesn't usually step on landmines like that. It walks around them, which is why if World War Z 2 actually moves forward, the final product will probably fall somewhere between Fincher's smaller, character-driven version and the full-scale war epic from the book. The political edges will be softened, but the emotional core, the fight for humanity's survival, will stay intact. And honestly, that's exactly what audiences want right now. People are tired of gloomy dystopias and stories about corrupt leaders manipulating everything behind the scenes. What they want is something bold and visceral, a movie about people standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting back against impossible odds. A full-blown global war against the undead sounds like the kind of spectacle that could absolutely bring this genre roaring back to life. The only real obstacle is the budget, but judging by Paramount's recent announcements, money doesn't seem to be a problem. The studio just confirmed 3 top franchises are being fast-tracked: World War Z, Top Gun, and Star Trek. From the original World War Z crew, at least 2 key players are already locked in: producer David Ellison and, of course, Brad Pitt. Without him, a sequel just wouldn't carry the same weight. The director, though, is still a mystery. Fincher scrapped his version and moved on to other projects. Ironically, one of them also starring Brad Pitt, which means the door isn't completely closed.